Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share a few thoughts on Memory of Fire, Century of the Wind by Eduardo Galeano. This is the third volume in his great Memory of Fire trilogy, which in my reading, honestly, is maybe the most underrated, underappreciated work of literature in the 20th century by any writer. What Galeano accomplished across this specific volume and the two previous volumes is an astonishing masterpiece. In this book alone, he sourced nearly 500 different primary and secondary sources on what was happening in Central America, South America, the Caribbean, North America, and globally, but primarily in the Americas across, in this case, the 20th century, up to about 1984. That's when he was publishing these, was in the 1980s. This is the volume that is the most personal for Galeano. This is written within his lifetime. So many of these individuals, historic individuals, real individuals lived in his lifetime, or he was living a generation, two generations after them. And so he has experienced the real effect of what is happening in Uruguay, in Argentina, in Chile during these years. And so there is a quiet fury, a passion that has simmered throughout all of the volumes of Memory of Fire. Here it bursts into full flame. And so that works on a lot of levels, and it gives a different current of energy, of darkness, but also of hope within this book. So I did want to read a few passages. As with the other Memory of Fire volumes, this is a book that is written with Galeano. It's almost like creative nonfiction. He takes real historical sources, he draws on them to write his version of what is happening, what might be in the mind of a person. But throughout, he also is directly quoting. Sometimes he'll give paragraphs from a document, sometimes it'll be sentences, and he always makes that clear with these italics. And this really is an achievement that everybody should be reading, not just people who live in a country in South America or Central America, or who live in the United States. This is a book that these three volumes really do comprise a deep understanding and appreciation of people, of culture, of history, of social movements, of justice movements, of reform, of revolution. And he is taking and drawing on all that, of literature, of technology, and he's concocting this incredible mosaic that gives life to so many. And so this book really drills in on the 20th century and then carries through different liberation movements into different totalitarian regimes, and ends with Galeano sort of writing this letter to his publisher, his editor, about, I finished it. I have to say this. I have to share these words. So I wanted to give a few examples of what he can continue to do within this work. In a very simple example of what Galeano can do. 1902, Saint-Pierre. Only the condemned is saved. On the island of Martinique, too, a volcano explodes. As if splitting the world in two, the mountain Pelée coughs up a huge red cloud that covers the sky and falls, glowing, over the earth. In a wink, the city of Saint-Pierre is annihilated. Its 34,000 inhabitants disappear, except one. The survivor is Luger Silbaris, the only prisoner in the city. The walls of the jail have been made escape-proof. And so there he gives a very quick story. He tells what happened, but there's that ironic tone that is permeating Galeano's writing. In this book, the irony starts to feel a little more bittersweet, a little more personal, and not just in writing about Uruguay or in the other nations where he's lived and the oppression there, but throughout this, he feels, I think, a closer kinship to some of his heroes like Augusto Sandino in Nicaragua here throughout these pages. In another section, he doesn't just stick to what's happening politically. He also examines what's happening culturally. And so he gathers together in a sequence of mosaic passages. He talks about the murder and assassination of Emiliano Zapata in the aftermath of the Mexican Revolution, and the way he jumps across these is really fascinating. In 1919, Cuautla, this man taught them that life is not only fear of suffering and hope for death. It had to be done by treachery, shamming friendship. A government officer leads him into the trap. 1,000 soldiers are waiting. 1,000 rifles tumble him from his horse. Afterward, they haul him to Cuautla and exhibit him face up. Campesinos from everywhere flock there for the silent march past, which lasts several days. Approaching the body, they remove their sombreros, look attentively, and shake their heads. No one believes it. There's a wart missing, a scar too many, that suit isn't his. The face swollen by so many bullets could be anybody's. The campesinos talk in slow whispers, peeling off words like grains of corn. They say he went with a compadre to Arabia. Hell, Zapata doesn't chicken out. He's been seen on the Quilamula Heights. I know he's sleeping in a cave in Cerro Prieto. Last night, his horse was drinking in the river. The Morelos campesinos don't now believe, nor will they ever believe, that Emiliano Zapata could have committed the infamy of dying and leaving them all alone. After that, there's a ballad, the ballad of the death of Zapata. Little star in the night that rides the sky like a witch, where is our chief Zapata, who was the scourge of the rich? Little flower of the fields and valleys of Morelos, if they ask for Zapata, say he's gone to try on halos. Little bubbling brook, what did that carnation say to you? It says our chief didn't die, that Zapata's on his way to you. And from there he jumps, 1919 Hollywood, Chaplin. In the beginning were rags. From the rag bag of the Keystone Studios, Charles Chaplin chose the most useless garments, the too big, too small, too ugly, and put them together, as if picking through a garbage can. Some outsized pants, a dwarf's jacket, a bowler hat, and some huge, dilapidated shoes. To that he added a prop mustache and cane. Then this little heap of rejected rags stood up, saluted its author with a ridiculous bow, and set off walking like a duck. After a few steps, he collided with the tree and asked its pardon, doffing his hat. And so came to life Charlie the Tramp, outcast and poet. And then from there, he contrasts that with Buster Keaton. And so he really is drilling in on what is to him most important and fascinating about the voices continuing from indigenous peoples of the American continents, but also from the cultures that are arising, from Mexican culture, from different Caribbean cultures that are arising in the aftermath of slavery. And the way that Galeano really tries to find those voices, tries to bring this picture to life, and the imagery he chooses, the phrase there about using the word like peeling grains from corn, there's a real beauty to much of the writing here. But he's also very clear like what side of history he is standing on, in particular with Sandino. Sandino is short and thin as a rake. A stray wind would blow him away were he not so firmly planted in the soil of Nicaragua. In this land, his land, Augusto Cesar Sandino stands tall and speaks of what the land has said to him. For when Sandino stretches out to sleep, his land whispers sorrow and sweetness to him. Sandino speaks of the secrets of his invaded and humiliated land and asks, "How many of you love it as much as I do?" 29 San Albino miners step forward. These are the first soldiers in Nicaragua's Army of Liberation. Illiterate, they toil 15 hours a day hacking gold out of the ground for a North American firm and sleep piled up in a shed. They blow up the mine with dynamite and follow Sandino into the mountains. Sandino goes on a small white burro. And there is a clear decision that he is making throughout in these pages. He depicts the sort of development of guerrilla warfare. He contrasts this later on with the Vietnam War. And if there's one way the book, the one element the book misses, I would say there's two elements that the book misses, and I think it's part of it is because of Galeano's incredible focus and the very personal nature of this volume in particular compared to the previous two. One is that he is very clear in the depredations and oppression that come from wealthier countries on workers, on farmers, on planters, on people who are truly toiling to allow others to enjoy a world. And he pulls absolutely no punches on, nor should he. What he misses are the omissions of silence, where he will contrast the horror of one regime with that which replaces it, but he will not necessarily go into the horrors that the new regime has, if it's one that he is aligned to. So he is very clear about the horrors of the Batista government in Cuba, but it is much more hagiographic when it comes to Castro or Che Guevara, and neglects perhaps people who suffered and were executed and murdered under their rule as well. And certainly the evidence of history points firmly and firmly plants its thumb on one side of those scales. But Galeano doesn't seem willing to put his thumb on the other side. And so that's one. The other element that I thought might have enhanced the book, and it was perhaps just something that was not coherent to his narrative, is the American Indian movement in the United States in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. Really, I think, found a new, renewed voice in a large sense. And Galeano had spent a lot of time writing about Indigenous voices and Indigenous voices in Canada, the modern Canada and the United States, in his previous two volumes. Here, he's less focused on North America, particularly those two countries of North America. And so he doesn't go into that. And I think that's one of the only things that would have enhanced the book, is hearing the way Galeano would have tried to examine the voices and the leaders of the American Indian movement. I think that would have been a great thing. But the book itself continues to be a marvel. I cannot encourage folks enough to read these books, dig into the sources. I mean, he's not just making things up as shocking, as violent, as uncomfortable as these works will make readers feel. Galeano is not just making these up. These are sourced passages. And so, like I said, please read this, get into it, pay attention. Galeano does write about his appreciation for literature is evident. He writes about different writers. So he quotes from Gabriel García Márquez's Nobel Prize acceptance speech, and has an earlier passage about Márquez. He talks about Juan Rulfo, and the way that Rulfo's childhood experiences in the aftermath of the Mexican Revolution certainly permeate his writing. He notes Alejo Carpentier, a fantastic Cuban writer. Julio Cortázar comes up. And then Horacio Quiroga, Augusto Roa Bastos. There are so many that he is finding and sharing that voice with. He talks about music and dance movements, artists, and it's really fantastic. I think a couple of modern writers who have taken some of the ideas that Galeano was writing about or sharing in these books and tried to make them their own. One would be The President's Room by Ricardo Romero, about the sort of totalitarian regime in this case. I think it's supposed to be pretty clearly Argentina, and just what that felt like. But another work would be Gabriela Cabezon Camara's The Adventures of China Iron, where she rewrites the great Gaucho epic of Argentina, and provides a very fascinating narrative. But as I said, Memory of Fire is one to find, to read, to reread, and pay attention to. So if you're a fan, let me know. And I hope everyone's doing well. Thank you.